My name is Moshe Kruger. I'm the executive director of the Jewish Federation. And welcome to Fed Talks. I will tell you this, you are in store for a very special program this morning. Aaron Perri is here. Aaron is the executive director of South Bend's Venues, Parks, and Arts. He is the perfect person to kick off our Fed Talk series to envision our shared Michiana Jewish future. His talk is titled Bold Thinking, Innovation, and Community Sustainability, Leading Change in South Bend. But first, a few words about Fed Talks. What is the purpose of Fed Talk? Simply put, it is a tool for community conversations. Conversations our Jewish community needs as we plan for the next 3 years and beyond. This 3-year community plan has a name, and I call it Vision 2025, Renewal Begins Now. So what is required of me? If you ask the prophet Micah, he would say, of course, to act justly, to love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. But in this job, what is required is a laser focus to execute a twofold objective: to fulfill our mission today and prepare for tomorrow. By fulfilling our mission today, I mean we must be a relevant, high-functioning communal organization capable of executing our Federation's mission as the central resource in Michiana to embrace, connect, and to support Jews locally and globally. And we do this through social services, coordinated fundraising, community outreach, and educational program. And by preparing for tomorrow, I mean creating a bright future in which individuals live with dignity and meaning and purpose and having a sense of belonging to the Jewish people. So what is it that connects these two divergent paths? It is something that I call the community strike zone. The community strike zone. It's a baseball term, right? The strike zone. You know that space where it offers that batter the highest probability of hitting that ball. So I think in life, like in baseball, the goal when we get up to the plate is hitting the ball more times than not. Am I right? And you know, when we make that meaningful connection, when we hit the ball, whether it's a baseball or a loved one, or you're connecting with a passion or with a child, these things often represent the sweetest and best moments in life. And here in South Bend, we also want to create an inviting space that enables us to connect with what we might call our own brand of Judaism. Our own brand of Judaism. So if we close our eyes for just a moment, how do we visualize this space? Is it a space of kindness and giving? Is it a space for beauty and grace? Is it inclusive? Does it promote unity? Do we feel safe and secure? Will it allow us to stretch and grow towards how we want to express ourselves Jewishly and to actualize our capacity to act more consistently with our highest selves? Vision 2025, Those are the aspirational traits that I would offer you. It's a vision that includes three broad areas of focus, as you will see on the slides. The first goal involves having intentional community conversations about what matters most. And what matters most is our shared mission, our vision, our values, and this thing that I call the community strike zone, right? That sweet spot. And Fed Talks is a platform for actionable community conversations. To talk, to listen, to engage, and to identify the critical community building opportunities that are likely to lead to a sustainable and brighter future. Which reminds me, I better turn off my phone. A better and brighter future, just as our community leaders did 22 years ago, when ground was broken for this community building for today's program. Like then, I think today we must ask ourselves, what is our once in a generation opportunity for community development? And this leads me to my next area of focus, and it has a very nice ring to it. In Hebrew, it's called Bayit Chazak. Bayit Chazak translates into being a strong and courageous house. And I think a lot about this goal. In fact, I believe in my bones that our strength comes from having the agency, if you will, to live Jewishly. That is, that we're able to derive joy and meaning to fully participate in Jewish culture, ritual, and other domains of Jewish expression and living. And this brings me to my next point. Empowerment is the pathway to engagement. These two strands, I kind of see it as a braided challah that will bake very nicely into this idea of Bayit Chazak. Strong, courageous. But we can't do that without this next focus. Kalal Yisrael is deeply rooted in our Jewish DNA. One people, one community. This idea of unity is the third plank in Vision 2025. Simply put, the goal of one community underscores our collective responsibility to reach the greatest number of Jews and to empower them to lead a Jewish life. It's interesting. Jewish population surveys conducted by the Pew Research Center, by major universities and foundations, and yes, even Jewish federations over the last few decades have continually seen a rise in the percentage of Jews who choose not to identify with our major movements in Judaism. Right? Who choose not to identify. What does this potential existential threat mean for the future of Judaism? Are we, as the data may be suggesting, moving towards what might be called a post-denominational era? Perhaps especially among the conservative and reform movements? This much I know. In conversations with local congregational leaders, this post-denominational scenario in our community, it seems, is an unlikely reality, at least in the near term. Yet, with a significant number of American Jews placing a greater value on seeking community connections over membership-based affiliations, here's where we may have an opportunity to build a bridge here it comes, in our community strike zone for Jewish learning, for Jewish engagement. If we hit this ball to learn and to engage, I think the significance will be that it will connect people and bring renewed energy to our denominational movements. So what road will we take? Well, we'll pick the thread up on this conversation after being inspired by the expert that we have in the house, who knows a thing or two about the trials and tribulations of community building. Aaron Perri. Aaron Perri, a master community builder. He works to provide quality places and experiences in the city of South Bend as the executive director of South Bend Venues, Parks, and Arts. He is currently overseeing an $80 million public space investment as part of the largest economic development initiative in the city's history. $80 million. Aaron is also a graduate of the University of Notre Dame. He has earned an undergraduate degree in arts and letters and also has a master's of business in administration. But there's more to Mr. Perri. Aaron is a published author, consultant. I understand you're well-traveled. And he has extensive experience in business development, event planning, entertainment, and food services. Aaron is active in many local boards and has received state and nationwide recognition for his community development efforts. Now, what I'm going to say next is very impressive, so please listen. Just last fall, Aaron's department was recognized as the top parks department in the United States. Yes. Recognized as the top parks department in the country via the National Gold Medal Award. This is the highest recognition of excellence in the field. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, please put your hands together and give Aaron Perri a warm Federation welcome. Aaron?
There's a book, I don't know if anybody's familiar with it, Nothing Ever Happens on My Block, children's book. I'll take you through it. It's one of my favorites, and it's pretty short, but it talks about this guy named Chester Filbert, okay? Chester kind of sits like this in front of his house. He lives at, I think, where is it? 5264 West 177th Street. So Chester sits in front of his house and talks about what some places have. Some places have marching bands, and some places have haunted houses, and some places even have fireworks. But nothing ever happens on my block. And when I grow up, I'm going to move. I don't know what's happening exactly in this picture, but there's like money flying everywhere, right? But it's not good enough for Chester because he sits there like this the entire time and never bothers to turn his head around to see what was actually happening on his block. I took Chester and had an illustrator friend of mine draw him in front of South Bend. So, does anybody know a Chester? Is anybody in the room at Chester? No, I won't ask that. Here's Chester in front of the East Race, the Morris Performing Arts Center, Four Winds Field, and otherwise. Somewhere along the way, I kind of taken this as my life's mission to help Chesters turn their head around and focus on what is good around here, or what could be good around here. This is another example of a Chester, by the way. If it's not good enough for her, is it good enough for anybody? I'm going to tell you a little bit about my job, weave in some stories about the things we've been up to and what we've got planned, and tell you a little bit of under the hood secrets, I think, that have made us successful, and perhaps ones that you could use in life as well. The areas I oversee are roughly outlined on the screen here. The Department of Venues, Parks and Arts oversees what sometimes I say is all the fun stuff in town. We don't have to deal with potholes or public safety or fire or trash or sewer. We get everything else. And so sometimes the mayor and I joke, he says, I've got the best job in the community. I said, no, I've got the best job because I've got all the fun stuff. And so these are the things we call quality of place type things. In fact, in a city, the most fundamental things that are critical to our survival, a lot of times people will start going like, right, it's the roads and the sewers, it's the trash pickup. We need solid public safety and so on and so forth, these economic development initiatives that we do. But I would argue, I would really submit that if we had the smoothest streets in the world, there were no potholes, if our trash got picked up on time every time, every fire was extinguished, within 3 minutes of it starting. There was no violence. And if we could imagine a place like that, it would perhaps still be a place that people wouldn't want to live. It's the types of things that we get to do that create a meaningful experience for us to connect with one another and enjoy what a city really has been built for, relationships and experiences. And so when I took over, there was about, I don't know, a dozen or more strategic plans and planning effort documents that I pulled off the shelves of my office. This is literally a picture. I threw them all out on the desk. And studied them, read through them all, kind of understood what was going on in there. But in my opinion, none of them really seemed terribly actionable. They were full of ideas and concepts, but nothing we could really encounter. In fact, the one that's over here on the far side of the screen, it was called the City of South Bend 5-Year Master Plan for Parks. And it said there was about $35 million worth of needs in the park system that we had to address. And they handed it to me and said, here's the playbook. And by the way, there's only about $5 million worth of resources to accomplish this. And I don't know if you were paying attention to what Moshe said, but here we are about 7 years later, we're finishing up $80 million worth of projects. And we were able to do all of that without raising any taxes or adding any new taxes. And so that was really exciting. Yeah. Now, what was the secret? How did we get there? Of course, we had to write a new strategic plan. No, but this time we really took an eye towards ensuring it was very, very actionable. And so that's what that looks like. And it resulted itself, of course, in the gold medal. We were finalists the year prior and won it last year and some accreditations. So one of the frameworks I lecture on and I love to bring into conversations like this is an experience framework. I copywrote it a few years back. It's what I take around to organizations. And this is, if there's one secret behind what we do, it's looking through these lenses. The programmatic, the promotional, and the physical experiences. So you've got these kind of 3 leaves here, and you can say they're shaded. That scale of emotional response is indicated by the shading. If it's on the kind of a paler side, that would be a negative emotional response. As it gets fuller and less transparent, that's a positive emotional response. So that's our scale of emotional response. What does that mean? If I take physical, right? We're on a beautiful campus here. We've got a great building. This is the physical environment that we're in. It's the things you feel, you touch, you see, you smell, you hear, those types of things. You can imagine what this could look like if it wasn't a positive experience right now. We're in a great space. In our parks, you go to our parks, we aim for positive looking spaces, not negative, right? You could imagine then on the promotional side, we've got to tell people about things, right? You can't just, it's not enough just to have a space like this, you have to promote it. And you can imagine what bad promotions are and what good promotions. And then finally, the programmatic side. This is a program. We're here, and you have to strategically keep places active and filled with various programs. Sometimes, at the Morris Performing Arts Center, those are our concerts, right? If you were a restaurant, what's your program? It's your food. It's your menu, right? Those types of things. And so the whole premise here, I get a little nerdy, by the way. You're going to see like macroeconomic, you're going to get a Venn diagram, you're going to get a bell curve, you're going to get it all today, okay? This is sometimes written out in a function. I won't belabor this one. It actually stands for the emotional response is a function of the programmatic, physical, and promotional experiences, exponentially influenced either positively or negatively by context. it looks like this a little bit more graphically. So these three leaves come together and with context on the outside pushing it in. They all have to work together. You can't, it's not enough to do just one. I can't build a great space and not tell anybody about it, right? We cannot have a really, really great program and put it in a space that doesn't match the caliber of the program that we're offering. And in fact, I can't go out and put up all these great Facebook ads and radio campaigns and billboards and say, come see the new Howard Park. And people show up and go, whoa. You have to, that could work once, but it's not very sustainable. And then the context side of things, that's really important. It could be something like our promotions, for example. We can put out a great series of promotions, but if we're not, perhaps we're picking up a conversation we were having earlier. If you don't speak English, you might not relate to our great promotions. And so we've got to think through the context in which we're offering all these things. This is both a planning and evaluative tool that we use for every project we work on. So if we're starting a new program, a new promotion, or a new project, we're going through and running it through this framework and asking, what is the experience on all three of these leaves? Similarly, it's an evaluative tool. After something's done and completed, we run through the framework as well. And so that's kind of the backbone. The idea of the emotional response can be kind of thought about or visualized in this bell curve here. See, I promised you bell curves. It's kind of a standard distribution. Those of you that understand these things have seen these before. Say, okay, this is this kind of continuum, and most people find themselves in the middle of the continuum. We like to ask this question about how do you feel about South Bend? How do you feel? This is asked across all organizations. It could be asked about your synagogues. It could be asked about the Federation as a part of your evaluation, Moshe. How do you feel about Moshe? Yeah, no, whatever the case may be. It could be asked at your work, at your nonprofits, or otherwise. And so the hypothesis here is that it's a standard distribution, that most people are neutral. You have some people that are on the far end of the continuum. They're hostile. We call those the haters. And then we have people that are the lovers. I can tell we've got a bunch of lovers in the room because you're giving up time on a Sunday to be here and engage with one another in this space. But in fact, it's really interesting to me when we talk about this continuum. We ask this question in South Bend, and it usually comes back in our statistically valid surveys, something like this, the standard distribution. You know, sometimes I wonder why the haters even live here. Sometimes you're like, they're always commenting on social media and things like that. And then these people I love to work with, they're always supporting everything we're doing and otherwise. But the whole premise is if we can strike the center of that experience framework, we can move people along this continuum. And it dramatically changes the city, a place forever, an organization forever, if you can move people along the continuum. I don't think the haters become lovers. That's really hard to do. But sometimes I wonder, can the haters just become a little bit more bored? And can the people that are bored become a little bit more neutral, and so on and so forth? You see how this works. And so what we endeavored to do was really fundamentally change the city. And so the MySB Parks and Trails Initiative, that was just about our shared public spaces, the parks. And these are all the projects we've completed in the past 5 years. And we're really proud of that work. One of the ones that's not too far from here that a lot of people point to and we get a lot of good feedback on was Howard Park. In 1 year's time, it went from this to this. That was 1 year. And so it's just a fantastic place. If you haven't been there, it really truly does hit on all three of the emotional frameworks. We've got another very, very high profile one coming. In terms of dollars and cents, this is actually going to be more expensive than Howard Park. And this afternoon, in fact, I'm not going to be able to stay and enjoy the buffet and the mimosas because I have to go over. We're breaking ground on the new Dream Center at the Martin Luther King campus on the west side of South Bend. It's on Linden Avenue, kind of by Frankie's Barbecue, if you haven't been over there, you know, so it's in that area. This will be nearly a $20 million project, a really incredible facility that endeavors to change that neighborhood dramatically. Linden Avenue used to be a commercial corridor. Right now, all the storefronts are effectively vacant or underutilized. The idea that this could be a catalyst to start to change that neighborhood. The building will be about 3 times the size of what's there today, 2 basketball courts, indoor track, fitness center, maker spaces, event spaces, indoor, outdoor spaces. So we're really excited about that on today, Martin Luther King's birthday, actually. And so we've got that literally right after this. I've got to jet over there. But some of the secrets, again, isn't just the experiential framework. We ask the why when we do all of these projects first. And so back about 14 months ago, maybe 16 months ago, before we even put pen to paper on how we were going to redo the King Center, we started saying, what's important? Why do we even want to do this to begin with? And so we had community forums and meetings. It would be in a room similar to this where we're talking to one another and we come up with our guiding principles. To say, why are you doing something first, helps you answer the really tough questions when you get there later. And so these kind of pull themselves out and we put each one together. I won't read them all to you, but attached some emotional quotes and fully defined what this means. Because sustainable, somebody might have seen that right away and said, oh, we're talking about ecologically sustainable, right? And in fact, that weaves its way in through here. But what the community was saying more poignantly was, we want this to be sustainable. We don't want it to fall apart. We don't want just building a $19 million building that's beautiful. We want it to be programmed and well taken care of into the future. And so it's just interesting when you think about the guiding principles and why we're doing things to begin with. So always start with the why. There is a great book out there called The Answer to How is Yes. There's a lot of books I'll recommend you read along the way. If you talk to me long enough, I'll give you a ton of books. This one, I don't think you have to necessarily read because I'll tell you exactly what you can get out of 200 pages in about one sentence. And it's the best sentence in the book. It says, the most common reason, most common rationalization for not doing something we truly believe in is because either it takes too long or costs too much. Hey, we really want to do this, but I don't know, how are we going to afford that? Or that seems like a lot of effort. That's going to take a long time. That's the most common rationalization for not doing what we truly believe in. And then you pursue something else or a watered down version of it or whatever the case may be. The premise of the book is say what you want to do first and then work on aligning the resources later. We went to the moon, right? Can you imagine what those boardroom meetings were like? Well, that sounds really expensive. Nobody's ever done that before. How are we gonna, what about what about re-entry, right? All of these things. That wasn't the topic of the conversation. There's the antithesis of this book I ran across fairly recently. It's called the Simple Sabotage Field Manual. Okay, this was put out in 1944 during World War II. Okay, this was prepared under the direction of the Office of Strategic Services, which is the precursor to the CIA. Okay, and what it does, it's about a 56-page book. So if you want to learn how to make something not happen, read this book. Let me see if you know of any of these tactics that people use in meetings. Never permit shortcuts to be taken in order to expedite decisions. Insist doing everything through proper channels. Make speeches, talk as frequently as possible and at great lengths. Never hesitate to make a few appropriate patriotic comments. When possible, refer all matters to committees for further study. Bring up irrelevant issues as frequently as possible. Haggle over precise wordings of communications, minutes, and resolutions. Advocate for caution and reasonableness, so on and so forth. It goes on and on and on. Have anybody been in a meeting where they felt like somebody has read this book? This was designed for allied simpaticos that were living in access countries to figure out how to sabotage their progress and success. And so I feel like anytime something comes up and, let's bring that to committee. Let's look at that later. I want to pull this out and go, did you read this book? Whatever the case may be. That's the antithesis to the how is yes. One of my favorite projects, I just wrote a blog on this fairly recently. One of my favorite projects, people often ask, which one is your favorite? Howard Park, these big ones. And I frequently say the favorite project we haven't done yet. we're going to figure out what the next one is. And I'm going to be more excited about it than I was about the last. But this one was really fun. So what we did was we worked with an artist. His name's Ben Roseland, a local artist. Some of you may know him. And he created this piece of art here. I went to FedEx Kinko's and cut it up into 704 little pieces, okay? And then what we did was come up with these instructions. I thought this could be a great idea to have people paint what they saw on the little pieces onto 1 foot by 1 foot tiles. And so we took it to Art Bee, we took it to schools and churches and had people paint, 704 unique artists paint what they saw. It was a risk. I wasn't sure exactly what we were going to get back, but we reassembled it. We went out to the Century Center, and this is what it kind of looked like. That was hard, by the way. We did label the back of each one, so we knew how to put the puzzle back together. And it came out something like this. It's not exactly like the original, but pretty darn close and impressive. We thought originally we were going to go put this on a wall and mortar all those tiles up. That became a challenge, and so we actually had it screened onto the wall, which was a much better outcome. And so it's over there across from LaSalle Grill on the alley by the parking garage there, if you haven't seen it. Just a really neat story to see how that thing manifests itself. But my favorite thing about it is the fact that it took everybody. So maybe that's another kernel of input as to why maybe we're successful with a lot of these things, because you involve everybody. You might hear tough comments. You might have things shape up a little bit differently than you had originally imagined. It might not turn out like the original vision or picture, but I will tell you the things we do are infinitely more valuable when we have everyone involved. And so that's kind of the lesson behind that picture. We take our team often, going back to the experience framework, and do these experience audits. So we'll go to a place and it's a cross-functional team. And so that's part of the involve everyone. We won't just take people that are from this. I think we're outside the East Race in this picture, and we're at Leaper Tennis in this picture. We don't just take the people that work at the East Race and do the experience audits. We take people that work at the facilities, we take people that work in finance, and we go and do these experience audits. So the more people you involve, the more perspective you get, I'll say the more valuable your outcome will be. The next perhaps tidbit that I'll offer, I'll use this as an exercise to get us there. It's winter, so I'm going to ask you to imagine a beach. Just go with me with your mind. You don't have to close your eyes. You can if you'd like. A beach where you have perhaps some mountains and there's the water and sand. Perhaps you hear some birds, maybe some trees with some shade. Everybody kind of got a beach? Maybe it looks something like this. Or did it look something like this? This is your beach. Did anybody imagine a beach like this? It's got water, it's got sand, it's got mountains. I think there's some trees. The birds are penguins, right? You know? So I love to use this one, especially when we're talking about communication and you're involving a lot of people. When you involve a lot of people, there's a risk, right? That they might not understand the message or might not buy into the message. And so being crystal clear and strong communication, that's a whole nother lecture, but that's just an interesting way to think about that. Another way to do this is these 3 simple questions. If you're doing any planning process or otherwise, we often will bring these up. What are people saying about you? These days, it's really easy to kind of understand what people are saying about you, particularly in my line of work where it's very public and visible. And so all you have to do is look on the comments of a news story and you know what people are saying. What are people saying? What do you want them to say? Assuming it might be different than what they are saying. What do you want them to say? And then what are you doing to get them to say it? That's incumbent on some action on you now. I ran across this. How many of you get all your wisdom and news from social media? No, just one person online, probably. I ran across this scrolling through Facebook, I think, fairly recently, but it was one of those inspirational things that show up on your news feed, and it said, choose your hard. And you read it. Marriage is hard, divorce is hard. Obesity is hard, being fit is hard. Being in debt is hard, so is being financially disciplined. Communication is hard. Not communicating will produce a lot of hard results as well. Life will never be easy. It'll always be hard, but we can choose our hard. Just running across that, the answer to how is yes. These things are hard. Some of these things are difficult. But which one of those ones do you want to choose? That was the motivational message. I was thinking about, it starts off with marriage hard, divorces. I just got married last summer. I've never been married, 44 years old and never got married. Finally took the plunge. Marriage is hard. But you know what? Going back to that answer is how, the answer to how is yes. When I got down on one knee and asked my wife to marry me, I guess she wasn't my wife at the time, right? She was my girlfriend to marry me. She didn't say, well, how's this going to work? Like, that's going to be expensive, right? Or do you put the toilet paper on this way or this way? Or do you keep the cabinet door? We didn't go through all that. She said yes, right? And now we're, as we've been married now 6 months or so, and that's how you decide what you want to do. Maybe some of you asked for that all before you said yes, but I don't think that's not how it works. There's a great book called The Art of Relevance. This one is really good. It talks about museums, libraries, symphonies, and even parks, and how sometimes they struggle with being relevant to their end users, especially as the end users' kind of profile and likes and preferences have changed so dramatically over the past few decades. And so how do libraries and museums and places like parks keep up with that changing user profile? We often are having to ask that question, and involving everybody helps you get to the right answer. Part of an initiative we're working on right now that involved a lot of those questions is our Morris 100 Initiative project. This is an aspiration to basically build in the empty parking lot between the Morris and the LaSalle Hotel on some new entertainment spaces. Not every single show we do can be in a 2,500 seat theater. Nowadays, you need a little bit more space in the theater, and you need circulation and more elevators and stairwells and bars, more restrooms. I often joke about the Morris. Sometimes if it's at intermission, right, you have to choose, am I gonna wait in the line for another glass of wine, or am I gonna wait in line for the bathroom? We wanna be relevant. We want you to be able to do both and not have very long lines. So this is a campaign. This is a $30 million project. We finished the first phase of it already, which was the existing theater renovations. It's a 100-year-old theater. We've got all new seats, all new HVAC floor, new ceiling, new lighting. And this phase we hope to break ground on later this year once we finish up the fundraising. The final thing I'll end on is it might actually be truly my favorite project and throughout the course of time. During South Bend's sesquicentennial celebration, our 150th year. Did you hear me, sesquicentennial? It took me a long time to get that word right, but we rehearsed it. We installed the South Bend River Lights. If you don't know a lot about the River Lights, you've certainly seen them before. The River Lights are really interesting. We can change colors, right, by season. Here's 4th of July, we'll have the red, white, and blues. And during Christmas, perhaps the red and green. We turned everything blue when we did the menorah lighting. St. Patrick's Day, green and orange. When Notre Dame wins, we turn it blue and gold. And I always joke, when they lose, we just shut it off. Done. It was off a few times this year. No, that's not true, but it's just a really special project. In fact, they're interactive. If you didn't know that, by the way, right now, one side is offline because Sites Park's under construction, but you can do this. This is a throw. And if you can activate 3 throws on one side of the river within 5 seconds, so you gotta have some friends with you, it'll change color lights that go. And so it'll these towers will fill up with blue and then spill across the river, blue, 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 until it gets to the other side. And then that fills up with blue. And if you're over here, you can catch it. That's a catch. Okay, and once you do a successful throw catch, so you gotta have friends on both sides of the river, the bridge will reward you with a little show. And then you can throw yellow back, or it's a really neat thing. And so just a spectacular project. But one of the reasons I really like it is because it highlights an area that was so important to South Bend's history. And perhaps my final lesson or tidbit that I would use is using history as a foundation for future plans is critical. Of course, we want to be relevant, right? We want to hear people, we got to involve people, but there's so many nuggets in history that can get us there. And so this was a critical site to South Bend's evolution. At the turn of the century, when industry was really coming online, it produced all the hydroelectric power that made manufacturing possible in our community. But even prior to that, right, It was the European trade route. That's how critical this area was. It was what the Native Americans used for transportation and otherwise. It's what we use today for recreational delight and economic development. Well, taking a page out of history's book, currently, as we speak right now, Sites Park is now generating power once again. The University of Notre Dame installed 10 hydroelectric turbines beneath the park, which is producing somewhere between 7 and 10% of the university's electrical needs. Through that partnership that we were able to provide with them, and this is going back not only history and context, but first principled, right? Economic development, but also environmental sustainability. Why are we doing these projects, right? Notre Dame's investing back in the park. This is what it will look like by the end of next summer. So we're very excited about bringing this back online. It's been offline for almost 4 years now during a very complex project, but the new Sites Park will be better than it ever was before. And this is, I'll conclude by reading you one of my favorite historical tellings of South Bend and that particular dam where the river lights are today. And I think if you pay attention, a lot of the nuggets I shared along the way are here. South Bend has been using this playbook for decades. This is called the way to make a city. When the dam across the St. Joseph at South Bend was built, the people took hold as one man. It was a matter of life or death to the rising young town. The citizens met in earnest convocation, and all were impressed with the necessity of immediate action. Effectively, what was going on here is they knew that the city was growing and they needed a power source. They knew they needed to convert that river into a power source. So it was resolved to do the work at once and effectually. Almost every man subscribed. Some put down 25, some 100, and some even more. Even back then, they were doing fundraising to make their projects possible. And then came the tug of war. Subscriptions, fundraising was insufficient, but the necessity was imminent. What was to be done? A determined people knew how to answer this question. It was resolved that each citizen, rich and poor, young and old, should do personal labor upon the work for at least 2 hours per day. So they didn't have enough money to do it, and they said, okay, Mark, everybody's gonna, Ian, come on, grab the shovel, let's go. And the town turned out en masse. Lawyers and doctors, clergymen, teachers, merchants, and mechanics handled the spade and trundled the barrel. And at length, the work was done. South Bend was underlaid with a treasure almost without price. From that day, the future of the then small village, a now and large advancing city, was assured. The same spirit has and always does now animate the people of South Bend. No such word as fail has ever been recognized here. That's what we do and why we do it.
That was terrific, Aaron. Thank you so much. We're going to get to Q&A in just a second. In the meantime, please have a seat next to my boss. Wow, that was great. So again, thank you, Aaron. Thank you so much. Aren't we truly blessed to have this kind of leadership in South Bend and the quality of life that you and your team are bringing to our community? Let's give Aaron one more round of applause. Let's show him that positive emotional response that he was talking about. So we're going to move into our Q&A. But before I do, just a quick shout out. I'd like to recognize some of our congregational rabbis. I see Rabbi Campanez here. You can just wave your hand. Rabbi Friedland next to the rabbi. Rabbi Denzinger is in the back. Thank you, Rabbi. Representing Midwest Torah, we have Rabbi Lindau. Hello, Rabbi. And there may be other rabbis here. And if so, I'm sorry that I didn't call on you. So now it's question and answer time. And this means for the folks on Zoom as well. So as you begin to think about your question that you would like to ask Aaron, I'm going to invite you back up here in just a second, Aaron. Let me kick things off while you're thinking about that first question. This question came in via email before the program. The question is, when it comes to setbacks and failures, why do transformational efforts fail? Can change happen without carnage? And in your experience, how do you win hearts and minds? Why don't you come back up?
Saw you in some of the promotional materials for this. You advertised the TED Talk I did on failure, and I would say failure is part of the process. It has to be. I mean, everybody's heard the old adage, right? A road with no bumps or obstacles leads to nowhere. It's not worth traveling, right? Those types of things. And so it's effectively a part. So I think the word carnage was in there. Boy,
yes.
We've had our fair share of carnage. Sometimes I'll go to public meetings and I'll think there's pitchforks literally somewhere in the room about an idea or a concept that might be unfolding. And the first thing is, one, that you're willing to be humble and listen and be in a group of people and actually take it in. That communication is critical, and it's two ways. Right. Second is that perhaps there's something to learn. I don't have all of the right ideas and concepts. For every thought and opinion and passion that's out there, there's probably a path forward. And each one of our projects are infinitely stronger because we listened and got the input that was realistic. But occasionally you'll bump up against something that's just, you're over here and I'm over here. And there really isn't a lot of compromise perhaps that even could happen. And in community development, that sometimes becomes a reality. The best part, the best things you can do in that instance is to focus on those first principle reasons, go back to the guiding principle. Why are we doing this to begin with? And why is this important to us as a community? And communicate. I hear what you're saying. Here are some of the ways we can respond to that, but I'm still understanding it's not going to get us all the way there. But this is the why behind what we're doing. Great. So
let's take a question here in the audience, and then we'll take a question in Zoom land. Ron?
One of the crown jewels of downtown South Bend, if not the entire city, is the Morris. Can you tell us more about the planned expansion of the Morris?
Yeah, I would. Thanks for asking, Ron. And I would agree. It is a crown jewel. And you think, what would this community be if that wasn't there? I mean, all of the restaurants, the hotels, there's no substitute for a show night in downtown South Bend. So first phase of the project is already complete. It's all new chairs, all new lights, literally a new roof, literally a new floor. So floor to ceiling, all the guts of the building. That was about $9.5 million project. Approximately 2/3 of this entire project is privately supported, made possible through a lead gift from Chris and Carmi Murphy and Ernestine Racklin. And then so many other generous folks in our community that have gotten us to the about $27 million mark of the $30 million necessary. And so we were able to complete phase one, and phase two really reimagines the entire outdoor plaza, gets us a new fountain, in fact, two fountains that'll flank an outdoor stage so we can have some more outdoor concerts. Fridays by the Fountain are very popular. We'd love to do more of that type of thing throughout the year. Provides for a better drop-off experience and entry experience into the theater. And adds the whole new performance space for smaller shows, more experimental shows. A beautiful two-story building that could be used for private events or otherwise. There's actually a sky bar with an outdoor patio on it too for those of you that are VIPs at the Morris. So very excited about what's gonna happen there. It will follow the money. So we're about, like I said, 85% of the way there. The hope is that as the resources are available, if all things go well, we'll break ground later this year.
Great. Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah.
We'll squeeze in one more question before we go to Zoom land on this side. Anything on this side? Okay, question here. Go ahead, sir.
MLK Center, when will break When are you going to break ground and how long will it take?
Yeah, so we're breaking ground this afternoon. The ceremony's at 1 o'clock. And so I have to get over there and get some things ready for that. We're expecting a few hundred people there, and it is free and open to the public if anyone's interested in sneaking over after your lunch here. It'll be about a 16-month process. And so spring, summer 2024, we'll have the new building back online. So in the meantime, programs have been relocated to other facilities throughout the community, and we're keeping the entire staff engaged as well. So,
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, so Steve, looking at the Zoom chat, do you have a question?
Any plans for improvements to the Robertson State Theater block?
Yeah,
Can you
the
repeat that?
Robertson State Theater block. So that is not in my purview, but people ask about the State Theater a lot. That is a beautiful venue. In fact, the State Theater, it used to be called the Blackstone Theater, and the Morris used to be called the Palace Theater. The Blackstone and the Palace were opened by the exact same Chicago businessmen. It was one of about 10 theaters in and around the downtown area, and the only two standing yet today are Jacob Handelsman's buildings. And so we know they have good bones. They were built well. It's privately owned. The State Theater is, and the city is certainly willing to open with the developer or the ownership there to figure out how it can be unpacked. But that block seems like it's a challenge, right? There's a couple of other large buildings, the old department stores that are all there. The city has some great programs. A couple of those buildings are owned by out-of-town folks that haven't been necessarily really motivated to do a lot of construction, but we stand by to figure out that block wherever possible.
Great, thank you for that. One more quick question. Yes, please. A comment.
Recently, I had the opportunity to see a wonderful program at the Morris,
Mm-hmm.
and we sat in the mezzanine, and the seats underneath were right up against the seat in front of them. There was absolutely no room, and I thought, if those are new seats, why did they build it that way with no space?
Right. We're hearing this comment a lot. So I think it's a comment and a question. I feel like I need to respond to that. The ground floor, if you've sat in the ground floor seats, those have infinitely more space. There was some kind of error in the balcony. Today, we actually have 2 different rows that have new trial seats in there. So there's going to have to be some reworking of the mezzanine. And they're not all that way. So it's really interesting. It's the ones closer to the aisles that are tighter. So you might have been closer to an aisle. As you move into the center, they're right. So something was wrong with the installation there. They'll be reworked here over time.
Sounds like you're going to work on that.
Yeah.
Okay, one more quick question. We'll go here. Here, if we keep them brief answers.
Yep.
Here, Rabbi, and then over to this side.
Sure, I'll be
To
quick.
Claudia, all right?
I'll ask the simple one. I know that, I've been hearing people talk about, possible, I don't know, we could offer the Miami corridor, where a lot of, part of the Jewish community lives, so I was wondering about that. And then the second one, I know that you talked in the beginning about how you and the mayor talked about whose job is better or fun or whatever. I was wondering, how your office works with the mayor's office, just how that relationship
Sure.
works.
Yeah, the Miami corridor.
Could you?
Sure. She asked about the
Repeat that question,
Miami,
yeah.
the Miami corridor, and were there any development plans along the Miami corridor? And then she asked how my office works with the mayor's office and what's our day-to-day. We have a department called the Department of Community Investment that's in charge of all the kind of commercial and neighborhood districts. We work mostly, our office, with the shared public spaces, and so don't do a lot of work on Miami except for the Erskine Park Golf Course, which got some major renovations. If you haven't been there lately, that building has been redefined. I do agree, though, that's a place like Linden Avenue where we're doing the MLK redevelopment that used to be very strong commercially, and it feels like it needs another shot in the arm somewhere along the way. So, what's that? And a park. That's an area that was really overbuilt without public spaces in mind. So I agree with you on that one. The mayor and I work together extremely closely. We talk, if not daily, for sure, a few times a week. And I think that's also, I probably should put in the presentation, critical to our successes. So often in community development, departments like ours are kind of pushed off to the side and an afterthought. The big boys get all the time and resources and energy. In the city of South Bend, that's not the case. We work extremely closely together.
So let's go to Rabbi Friedland, and then we'll go to Claudia.
So I have a question about, since you're here for talks, I wanted to ask a question about how this relates to the Jewish community. In 26 years that we've lived here in South Bend, there's been a big change in the Jewish community. If you go back 50 years, it's an even a bigger change in the Jewish community. Demographics, the economics, and now, at least in the liberal Jewish communities, there's been a diminishment in numbers, resources. And the question is, and you touched on this, but I want a little more clarity. The immediate response is, as the community gets smaller, resources get less, is gotta cut back, gotta cut back, gotta sustain yourself. But what you just talked about, we know that there are Jews in the community who just aren't belonging because of the change in demographics of the whole country. People, there are Jewish people, they don't belong to the traditional institutions. They don't belong to the Federation, they don't belong to the synagogue. So the question, there's people out there, but as you said, you gotta promote what you're doing, you gotta programming, but the more you cut, the less you can do to get the people. So then you have to, I just wanted to ask a little more clarity on how do you determine the whole cost investment analysis?
Yeah.
How much do you put in? How much do you, or how much do you pull back? Because obviously you said 80 million, but I'm sure if you had 100 million, you'd be
Sure, right.
For more.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a challenge. When resources are constrained, how do you decide where to invest and where the returns might come out? And certainly appreciate the way you tied it together with some of the struggles that the God's chosen people are facing even right here in our own city. It is a challenge. I think the secret of sauce, I guess, in my opinion, would always be start with the why and the how, and then unabashedly try to find the resources. And that helps you sleep at night if you're going that way. Now, I can tell you each one of these projects, that doesn't mean we have a blank check, right? Resources are always going to be finite. And so you have to figure out when you come up against, okay, we could have built the Morris for 35 million. Our target is 30. And right now, construction prices are going up, labor, supply chain, we're running in all these things. But we have a target. And so you have to figure out where you cut, why, and what makes sense. But money's not the only resource either. I think that's an easy way for people to compare things, our dollars and cents. And we talk about that a lot in our society. This is a $20 million project versus a $5 million project. But how do you get you can measure value in other ways than dollars and cents. And so I often tell the story. You said short answers. I can hang around afterwards and tell you the story about my mom's experiences as a kid in our birthday cakes. But, how do you get to those first principled reasons and that positive emotional response with constrained resources at the end of the day? It's not always money. That's not always the answer. It's heartstrings.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Thank you. Great response. Claudia, one more question.
Okay. Where is the MLK, how close is the MLK Center to the Kroc Center, and how are the functions of the MLK Center different from Kroc Center?
Can you repeat the question?
So she asked how geographically, where is the King Center in relation to the Kroc Center, and how do they function differently? I would say it's about 2 miles away, more on the further west side of South Bend. It's not far from the Amtrak station, if you know where that is, kind of back in there. And so it's a neighborhood center. In terms of user fees, Kroc is very well set up in terms of the cost, and you have to be a member to use that. Our community centers, our neighborhood centers are really designed for people that are in the immediate vicinity, perhaps walking distance, after school programs, mentorship programs. This one's very heavily focused on basketball, has a strong history of basketball. Kroc's got a strong aquatics identity and whatnot. So they've been complementing themselves very well for the past decade or so since Kroc's been online. The King Center predates it by about 50 years. And so I think there's enough room for both of them to continue to grow and excel. So I'll say one more line that perhaps I should have said over here. My staff hates me when I say this, but I truly believe it. When we run up against resources, in particular money becomes a problem, I often tell them, well, money is not the problem. Money's not the problem. Money's the solution. We just gotta go find more money. You know, problem is we don't have enough money. Well, then go find the money. It's always easier said than done.
I think we'll give an amen to that, don't you? Okay, so thank you very much. So now we've come to the third and concluding segment of the program, writing our next chapter. But before I get into that, just a couple of things that I'd like to share with you. First of all, I want to put a very bright spotlight on the Federation professional staff who made this event possible. My teammates in the kitchen, Judy Sassler, Dan Ravitch, Rabbi Nebel, and board member Dina Abraham. My teammate responsible for community engagement and is on tech duty today, Steve Lauder. My teammates working behind the scenes include John Ravitch and Dan Kosman. And I'd also like to give a shout out to Jessica Williams in your office, Aaron. She was amazing, just a terrific help in coordinating our efforts to make this day a success. So please forward our warm wishes to her. And finally, to our friend Aaron Perri, thank you for sharing your time and talents with us today. On behalf of the Federation and the entire Jewish community, we have a little token for you to show our appreciation. First, we got this little cacti plant for you. You can take it home. Yes.
This one I can't kill.
You can't. Yeah, right. Right. You could try, but you can't kill it. And you mentioned that you were recently married. So for your better half, here's something very special from Israel. All right. All right.
Pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we have a delicious brunch that awaits us. But a few concluding remarks. The good news is I think I'm going to go to the summary. And I got a big smile on my wife's face here. Does everyone know Karen, by the way? Karen Richmond, Dr. Richmond? Karen, you want to say hello? There she is. Okay. Writing the next chapter. You know, that might be another community conversation, but let's leave the conversation here in that, and I think you'll agree, change is inevitable. Right? My takeaway from Aaron's talk is that the change process requires a vision. So, I developed a vision. I developed a vision board. This board does not have the endorsement of my board or any congregation or community member. It's just really developed to spark ideas, to spark conversation. So during a brunch, I'll be standing by my vision board, which is under wraps here in the corner. And I would suggest once you have a mimosa in hand, I invite you to come over to my little corner to check it out, have a conversation. But I'll say two things about the board right now. First, its essence was conceived through my many community conversations. And two, it is built upon the foundation of, here it comes, Bayit Chazak and Kalal Yisrael, right? We spoke briefly about those two guiding principles earlier in the talk. That we can be one community in unity and solidarity, bound by our enduring values of Torah and justice, regardless of our religious or political views. So it really is time to wrap things up. If you found this morning's program stimulating, please be sure to mark your calendar for Sunday, February 12th, for Fed Talk number 2. In the next episode, on February 12th, same time at 10:30, we will hear the story of a small Midwest Jewish community and how they addressed their challenges of declining membership, financial stability, and yes, flagging leadership. As I said in the conclusion of my recent New Year's blog, and by the way, there are copies of my article at the Shishuk desk in the atrium, I'm optimistic. I am optimistic. We have an opening to build on our momentum in 2022 and to frame the issues that will advance Jewish life in our community. So on February 12th, please join me and others who are interested in shaping a vibrant community into a resource-rich environment that is healthy, secure, supportive, just like Aaron has done. 2023 is year one of Vision 2025. May it be a year that inclusively taps our human and economic and natural capital potential so that we can thrive and grow together. And I'll conclude by saying, may God strengthen our common bonds and teach us to celebrate our uniqueness.